There's something few dare to say out loud, yet many have quietly felt. As our parents and grandparents enter their later years, the relationship between generations doesn't just remain about love. It becomes a space where quiet tensions live, a lingering discomfort, a subtle sigh behind a gently closed door. Elders often don't realize that the habits they've grown accustomed to, constant complaints, overbearing advice, stories repeated over and over, can, unintentionally, feel suffocating to the younger ones. It's not that their children or grandchildren don't love them. They do, deeply. But the weight of that love begins to grow heavy, and out of respect, out of guilt, few ever find the courage to speak it out loud. Family bonds rarely break from one harsh word, but they quietly erode through countless unspoken wounds. This article is not here to criticize or blame. It is a mirror for those who have walked through most of life to reflect gently on themselves. It is a bridge for the younger generation to better understand the loneliness and longing for connection that often lives in the heart of the elderly. And it is a soft whisper, a reminder that small changes in daily habits can bring about profound shifts in family closeness. So let us begin this journey of understanding, not with judgment, but with compassion. Because love isn't always in what we say. Sometimes it's in how we choose to listen, and how bravely we're willing to change. Before we start, subscribe if you believe that the elderly carry treasures the world needs to hear. Constant complaining. Turning every day into a list of grievances, complaining in itself is not a flaw, it's human, it's a release. It's sometimes even a way to connect through shared frustration, humor, or reflection. But when it becomes the dominant tone of a person's presence, it begins to wear down the emotional fabric of those around them. For many older adults, especially those retired or living with health limitations, the pace of life has slowed. The world continues to move quickly, but their days may feel longer, quieter, more repetitive. And in that stillness, the mind searches for stimulation. When the body aches or the news disappoints or a memory resurfaces with pain, complaint becomes the most accessible language. Yet what begins as casual venting can slowly become a habit, an invisible pattern. The focus shifts almost unconsciously from noticing what's working to finding what's wrong. And once this lens sets in, even joy can feel like something to mistrust. Grandchildren start visiting less often. Meals grow shorter. Conversations become one-sided, guarded. The family still shows up, they still care, but their emotional presence becomes thinner, more cautious. They love deeply, but they grow weary. Weary of always having to brace for a sigh, a scolding, or a story that ends in bitterness. It's not that the younger ones don't understand pain. Many do, but they often wish their elders could also remember to speak of what's good, of blessings, of the resilience that brought them this far. They want to admire, not just console. This doesn't mean pretending life is perfect. It doesn't mean bottling up sadness. But balance matters, especially in shared spaces where memories are made. Sometimes, what an elder sees as just being honest, others experience as a steady drizzle of disapproval. Over time, this emotional climate can make a home feel colder than it really is. Bitterness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Malachi McCourt. The most precious gift a grandparent can give is not perfection, but peace. The kind that comes when a home is filled with not only wisdom but warmth, with stories that don't just revisit past regrets, but pass down hope. And so, pausing before we speak, asking ourselves whether this comment brings connection or complaint, can be a quiet form of love. One that says, I see you, I value this moment, I want to make it lighter, not heavier. Even in old age, habits can be rewritten, not for others' approval, but for deeper harmony. And often the first change is as simple as choosing to notice what's still beautiful, giving unsolicited advice. When love feels like control, advice from an elder can be a treasure. A single sentence, offered at the right time with the right tone, can shape a life. But when advice is given too often, too forcefully, or without being asked, it can stop feeling like guidance and start feeling like judgment. Many older people especially those who spent decades raising families, leading careers, or enduring hardship, carry a deep well of experience. They've seen enough to know where certain paths can lead. And so, when they see a grandchild making what they believe is a mistake, their instinct is to step in, to save them the trouble, to speak rather than let them stumble. But here lies the quiet friction between generations. Younger people often need to live their lessons, not just hear them. They need space to make their own decisions, feel their own consequences, and become their own person. When advice comes too frequently or too critically, it begins to sound like a lack of trust, a quiet message that says, "You don't know what you're doing." The intention may be love. The result, however, can be resistance. Adult children and grandchildren often don't say anything. Out of respect, they nod, smile, and let the advice pass through. But inside, they might feel dismissed or unseen. They may begin to avoid certain conversations, not because they don't care, but because they're tired of defending their choices. Wisdom is knowing the right path. Integrity is taking it, and grace is letting others find it on their own. Older adults may forget that the world their children are growing up in is vastly different from the one they knew. Jobs are different. Relationships look different. The rules have changed. And while some wisdom is timeless, not all of it translates directly. That doesn't make it less valuable. It just means it must be offered with humility, not insistence. Sometimes the most powerful advice is the one that waits to be asked for. It's not about being silent. It's about being discerning. Choosing. Moments when the heart is open, not guarded. Asking gently, "Would you like to hear what I think?" instead of assuming the answer. Because when advice comes from a place of deep respect, not just knowledge, it stops feeling like control and starts feeling like love. Dwelling on the past. When memories become chains, instead of wings, there's something sacred about a story told by someone who's lived a long life. Tales of resilience, war, love, loss, migration, tradition. These are the treasures younger generations rarely find in textbooks. They want to hear them. They want to remember. But when the past becomes a place someone refuses to leave, it no longer connects, it isolates. Many older adults find comfort in the past. After all, it's where they felt strong, useful, and needed. It's the era they understood, where things made sense, where they knew their place in the world. And so they return to it again and again, not just in stories, but in comparisons, in judgments, in subtle complaints that things were better back then. The problem is not the remembering. The problem is when the past becomes a filter through which the present is constantly criticized. The music today has no soul. Back in my day, people had manners. You kids have it easy. You don't know real hardship. Each comment on its own may seem harmless, but over time, it can feel like a rejection of the life younger people are trying to build. Like their reality is always one step below the one that came before it. They begin to feel they'll never measure up, that their present is not valid in the eyes of those they most want to impress. It's not that the younger generation rejects the past. They simply want to feel that the present also matters. And here's the deeper truth. Sometimes elders speak so much of the past because they don't feel they have a place in the present. They reminisce not just out of pride, but out of grief. They are mourning their younger selves, the bodies that moved without pain, the roles that gave them purpose, the people they've lost. That grief is real. But when left unchecked, it turns into emotional distance. A home filled with echoes instead of dialogue. The past is a place of reference, not residence, a place of learning, not living. Roy T. Bennett, the stories of yesterday should be shared, not as weapons of comparison, but as gifts, as seeds planted in young minds, not as shackles wrapped around them, because the most beautiful stories are the ones told with joy, not regret. And when elders choose to step into the present, even just a little, they remind everyone that wisdom doesn't belong only to the past. It can live here and now in the way we listen, the way we love, and the way we let go. 4. Being overly critical. When love sounds like nothing is ever good enough, few things run deeper than a parent or grandparent's desire to see their children succeed. They've lived long enough to know what can go wrong. They want to shield their family from disappointment, guide them toward a better path, and shape them into the best versions of themselves. But sometimes in trying to help, they forget. Constant criticism doesn't build confidence, it erodes it. You're getting too thin. Why are you still at that job? Your house is always messy. Why don't you raise your kids like we used to? These words often come from a place of concern, but when they pile up day after day, visit after visit, they begin to sound less like care and more like quiet rejection. The child who once beamed when they brought home a school project now hesitates to share anything. The adult grandchild who was proud of their small apartment suddenly grows silent when their grandparents visit. Not because they don't love, they love deeply, but because they feel like they're always under a microscope. Like nothing they do is ever quite right. And the saddest part is, the elders may not even realize it. Many older people grew up in a time when affection was not always shown with praise, but with correction. Love was expressed through high standards. They see pointing out flaws as a form of involvement, as a way of helping. But what they don't always see is the emotional fatigue it creates, the way it can turn warmth into walking on eggshells. You can't criticize people into becoming better. You can only love them into believing they can be. Children and grandchildren don't expect perfection. They don't need applause for everything. But they long for acceptance, for moments when they are seen not for what's missing, but for what's already there. Sometimes a simple sentence like, "I'm proud of you," or "You're doing your best, I see that," can heal years of quiet tension. It can unlock conversations that had long gone quiet. It can make someone want to come home again. There is still space for honesty, but it must walk hand in hand with compassion. Feedback, when wrapped in gentleness, becomes a bridge, not a wall, and as elders soften their words, they don't lose authority. They gain deeper connection, the kind that isn't rooted in being right, but in being remembered with love. Refusing to accept help. When independence becomes a silent wall, there is a quiet pride that lives in many older people, the kind that was earned, not inherited. They built lives from scratch, raised families through hardship, made do with little, and carried the weight of others without complaint. So when their bodies begin to slow, when memory slips or joints ache, asking for help can feel like surrendering something sacred. I can do it myself. I'm not helpless. You don't need to fuss over me. These phrases might sound strong, but behind them is often a deeper fear. The fear of becoming a burden. The fear of losing control, of losing dignity, of being seen not as a whole person, but as someone who now needs. And yet, the irony is this. When elders refuse help, they may believe they're protecting their pride. But to their children and grandchildren, it feels like they're building walls. Loved ones want to help, not out of pity, but out of devotion. They offer rides, help with groceries, help managing medications, not because they think less of their elders, but because they want to walk alongside them. They want to share the load, not take over, but be present. But when help is constantly rejected, it sends an unintended message. I don't trust you to care for me. And that can be painful. More than that, refusing help can create real risk. A fall that could have been prevented, a bill that goes unpaid, a health issue ignored too long. The consequences of pride can ripple through a whole family, especially when adult children are already stretched thin, juggling their own lives, children and responsibilities. Asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a way of saying, I still belong to this world, and I let others belong to me. The truth is, accepting help is not about giving up independence. It's about allowing interdependence. It's about letting love flow both ways. After all, these same children were once bathed, fed, held, and carried by the very hands that now resist being held. When elders allow themselves to receive, not just give, they model something powerful. Humility, trust, and grace in aging. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this. In accepting help, they don't lose their strength. They simply show a new kind of strength, one that whispers, I trust you, I need you, and I'm not afraid to let you in. 6. Repeating the same stories. When familiar words start to feel like walls, instead of window stories are the threads that bind generations. In a grandparent's tale lies the echo of a different world, a love that survived war, a childhood, without screens, a life built from sweat and dreams. When told with heart, these stories can be gifts, living memories passed down like heirlooms. But there's a delicate balance. When the same story is told again and again, sometimes 2 or 3 times in the same visit, it can begin to feel like something else, not connection, but distance. The repetition can become exhausting, especially when the listener is too polite to say anything but too drained to stay engaged. At first, they nod with interest. Then, they start glancing at the clock. Eventually, they may start visiting less, not out of disrespect, but from quiet fatigue. Elders often repeat stories not because they forget they've told them, but because those memories are deeply imprinted. They're comforting, familiar, like favorite rooms in an old house. In moments of loneliness or uncertainty, the mind returns to what it knows best. And sometimes, repetition is a silent cry for attention, for someone to really listen, not just to the words, but to what lies beneath them. The longing, the pride, the grief that's never been named. When an old man dies, a library burns to the ground. African proverb. But here's the truth. Stories need 2 things to thrive, a teller and a listener. And when the listener feels unseen, the bond begins to wear thin. So what can be done? For elders, try asking yourself, have I told this before? Is there something new I could share today? Or better yet, ask your loved ones about their lives. Show interest in their stories too. Because connection flows both ways. For younger ones, understand that repetition may not be about memory, it may be about meaning. Look for the emotion beneath the words. Sometimes simply saying, "That must have meant a lot to you," is more powerful than pretending it's the first time you've heard it. And for both, consider recording these stories. Write them down, save them for future generations. Because one day the repetition will stop, and you may find yourself wishing you could hear that story just one more time. Let stories be bridges, not barricades. Let them remind us not just of where we've been, but how far we've come together. 7. Complaining constantly. When every conversation feels heavy, everyone complains sometimes. A sore knee, a long wait at the doctor's office, rising prices, loud neighbors. Life offers no shortage of frustrations. And as we age, the list often grows longer. Health issues, loss of mobility, loneliness, the slow erosion of independence. But when complaining becomes the dominant note in every conversation, it begins to take a toll, not just on the person speaking, but on the people. Listening adult children may start every visit with good intentions, but leave emotionally drained. Grandchildren may feel guilty for not calling more often. Not because they don't care, but because every call turns into a litany of what's wrong, what hurts, what's missing, what used to be better. And eventually, without even realizing it, loved ones may begin to pull away. No one wants to say it out loud. No one wants to admit that the presence of someone they love has started to feel heavy, but that's the quiet truth so many families carry. A quiet sorrow, a quiet distance. Here's the deeper truth beneath it all. Constant complaining is often a mask for deeper emotions, fear, grief, or even a desperate need to feel heard. Aging brings so many losses, large and small. The body doesn't work the same. Friends pass away. The world moves faster and seems to leave the elderly behind. Complaining can become a way of coping, a way of saying, "I'm still here, I'm still affected, I still matter." But the irony is heartbreaking. In trying to stay connected through constant complaint, elders may unknowingly push people away. Bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to suffer. What's the way forward? For elders, try to share not just what hurts, but what helps. Speak of what brings you peace, what made you smile today, even if it was something small, a bird at the window, a kind word from a nurse, a warm cup of tea. Gratitude doesn't deny pain, it offers it companionship. For loved ones, listen with compassion but set gentle boundaries. Try saying, "I hear how hard this is, I'm here for you. Can we also talk about something lighter today?" Offer both presence and perspective, because when complaints are balanced with moments of joy, curiosity, or even silence, conversations begin to breathe again, and in those lighter spaces, love finds room to grow. guilt-tripping loved ones. When love feels like obligation, love from an elder can be one of the most grounding forces in a person's life. A grandparent's warmth, a parent's wisdom, the silent way they always remember your favorite food or worry when you don't call. That love runs deep, and often, so does their longing. As families grow, however, so does the distance. Physical, emotional, or both. Adult children become busy raising their own families. Careers pull them in 100 directions, and grandchildren grow up, find friends, and drift into their own worlds. And in those quiet hours of waiting for a call, a visit, a sign, they may begin to say things like, "You never come see me anymore. I guess I'm not important now that you have your own life. If I died tomorrow, would you even notice?" These words might sound dramatic, but they often come from a place of heartbreak, a sense of abandonment, a fear of being forgotten. But here's what so many elders don't realize. What they hope will spark closeness can often lead to guilt, and guilt never builds love, only resentment. When love becomes tangled with obligation, it changes. Visits begin to feel like chores. Phone calls are made out of duty, not joy. And slowly the bond starts to wear thin, not because the love is gone, but because the connection feels heavy. It's not wrong to express needs. Everyone wants to feel valued. But when those needs are wrapped in blame, they become hard to receive. True love doesn't beg for attention. It creates space for it to arrive freely. Elders may not see the full picture. They may not know how much their children are juggling, how tired they are, how hard they try to balance everything. They may assume silence means carelessness, when in truth it's often exhaustion. What helps is honesty, not in the form of guilt, but vulnerability. Saying, "I miss you," is very different from saying, "You never care anymore." Saying, "I'd love to hear your voice more often," feels gentler than "You always forget me." And for the younger generation, it helps to offer presence with intention. A short, heartfelt call, a handwritten note, a shared memory. These small acts, done sincerely, speak louder than any apology. In the end, we all want the same thing: to feel remembered, to feel wanted, to feel loved without strings. And when love is offered freely, without guilt, without shame, it has a way of returning tenfold. Overprotectiveness. When love becomes a cage. Instead of a safety net, as we age, our bodies become more fragile, our steps slower, our sense of invulnerability fades into something quieter, more cautious. It's a natural shift. The world becomes a little riskier, a little more unpredictable, and the people who love us feel that instinctively. They want to protect us from everything, from falls, from harm, from loneliness, from making mistakes. But sometimes in the desire to protect, elders can begin to stifle the very independence they once nurtured. What started as care evolves into control, and what was once a safety net turns into an emotional cage. "Are you sure you want to drive in this weather? Don't go out by yourself, let me come with you. You shouldn't lift that, it's too heavy." These words, though meant with the best intentions, can sometimes feel suffocating. What began as concern slowly morphs into the feeling that every step you take, every decision you make is being scrutinized. You start to feel like you're being treated as fragile, incapable, as though the people who love you have forgotten that you are still a person, still able, still capable. For the older person, it's often hard to see how protective actions can make their loved ones feel infantilized. They may not understand that with each well-meaning caution, they are taking away a bit of the autonomy their children or grandchildren fought so hard to maintain. They see it as love. The younger ones feel it as constraint. There is no freedom without risk, and there is no protection without trust. Unknown. The truth is, love doesn't always look like keeping someone safe from every danger. Sometimes it looks like letting them stumble, knowing they'll get up again. It means trusting that the younger generation has their own wisdom and instincts. It means letting them go and knowing that their wings are strong enough to carry them for loved ones of aging parents or grandparents. It's important to reassure them that you're still here, but also that they still have a place in the world, a role to play, a strength to offer. Empower them to make their own choices. Even when you disagree, ask for their advice. Let them feel like their wisdom still matters. And for the elder, reflect on what's truly helpful and what's simply an attempt to protect from a world that can no longer be controlled. Know that your loved ones may be scared, but they also trust you. They trust that you know when to lean on them and when to stand on your own. Because in the end, love should free us, not limit us. 10. Dwelling on the past. When yesterday becomes the only present as we age, the past often grows, larger in our hearts. Memories become treasures, and experiences, both good and painful, hold an undeniable weight. There's comfort in nostalgia, in remembering a time when everything seemed clearer, simpler, and more alive. But sometimes, that longing for the good old days can overshadow the present. I remember when things were better. Back in my day, we didn't have these problems. Life used to be so much easier. These reflections, though rooted in a deep and understandable yearning, can begin to sound like a dismissal of the present. They can make younger generations feel that their experiences are undervalued, their struggles trivialized. The past, while beautiful in its own right, becomes an anchor, holding us back from fully living in the now. For the elder, dwelling on the past may be a way of holding on to something that feels certain, a way to ward off the uncertainties of aging. But there's a cost. When we focus too much on what was, we miss the opportunity to fully experience what is. We may fail to see the beauty in new relationships, the joy in present moments, or the potential for growth that still lies ahead. The past is a place of reference, not residence. Unknown. The challenge is not in remembering the past, it's in letting it stay in its proper place. The past should be cherished for what it was, but the present is where life happens. And while the past can be a source of wisdom, it should never be the only story we tell. For younger loved ones, listen to those stories, but encourage the conversation to include the present too. Share your own experiences, let your elders see the world through your eyes, and make space for them to appreciate the changes that have happened in the world, even if they don't always understand them. For the elderly, try to embrace the present. See the new experiences that still unfold in your life. Sometimes it's as simple as appreciating a small moment, sharing a laugh with a grandchild, watching a sunrise, or reflecting on how much has been learned through the years. Your story is still being written. The truth is, you are not defined by what you were. You are defined by what you are and by who you continue to become. We've just walked through 10 habits that may seem harmless at first glance, but quietly build walls between the elderly and their loved ones. Perhaps somewhere in these reflections, you saw a glimpse of yourself, or the familiar patterns of your parents or grandparents who love you deeply, even if their way of showing it feels heavy at times. The real question isn't who's right or wrong, it's whether we have the courage to gently look inward, to make small changes while we still have time, to preserve what is most precious, our family connection. The elderly are like well-worn books, pages yellowed, ink faded, yet filled with profound stories. The younger ones are still writing theirs, but often forget the wisdom in the pages written before them. Between the generations, there may be distance, but if each side is willing to take just a small step toward the other, we might find that love never goes out of style. Sometimes, all it takes is a moment of quiet listening, a softer tone, a gentler word, and the unspoken cracks of a relationship begin to heal. Thank you for spending this time reflecting with us at Elderly Wisdom Archive. If this video touched your heart, please like, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel for more stories, insights, and quiet truths about life, aging, and the bonds that hold us together. Because understanding each other is a journey, and we're here to walk it gently with you, one step at a time. See you again in the next video.